This episode is sponsored by DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean is the hosting provider I use for devchat.tv. I also use it for my applications that manage the RSS feeds, scheduling, and sponsorships involved in delivering these shows. DigitalOcean is easy to use, has data centers all over the world, and provides terrific services including server hosting and object storage for delivering your web applications and assets quickly and easily. I use DigitalOcean because I love their interface. I get SSD storage for my servers, and their support replies quickly. So go check them out at digitalocean.com.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Elixir Mix. This is week 7, I believe, something like that. Anyway, we're well on our way to the Big 10. This week we have on our panel Mark Erikson.
Hey there.
Josh Adams.
Hello.
And we have 2 special guests today, Frank Hunleth and Justin Schneck. All right, guys, tell us a little bit about yourselves.
All right. Frank Hunleth. I'm a embedded software developer. Been working on nerves for quite a while now. Mostly in my day job, I had been doing C++ stuff. Now I'm working for a company called Smartrent, which is using nerves inside of a smart home hub for our apartment and other property management activities.
Okay.
Yep.
What about you, Justin?
So I'm Justin Schneck. I'm currently working for Tote and working on nerves a lot of the time and applying it basically in production that we have it in our warehouse for automation. On the side, I like to be able to see what kind of ideas I can come up with on how I want to take nerves and build stuff that I want to have in controlling and automating my home. And, I usually find that ends pretty quickly and abruptly when I have an idea and then the next day somebody on Twitter goes, look what I used nerves to build. So that's basically been my side job catch up. But most of the time, I'm either working on nerves or trying to be able to integrate it.
So when you say working on nerves, I think my kids work on my nerves all the time. That's like what I was thinking about when I'm hearing these nerves. I'm like, ugh, yeah, I don't know, man. So why don't you help me understand what nerves is?
Sure. Nerves is it's a way to be able to build firmware or software that would run on embedded hardware, stuff like Raspberry Pis, BeagleBone Black, variety of different stuff that we support out of the box. But it's essentially a collection of tools and frameworks that assist you in building embedded devices or things that you can use to be able to control, automate things. I'm doing a terrible job at explaining this holistically. Frank, what do you have?
Well, I just add that nerves is kind of a bridge from the Elixir world to the physical world. So a lot of stuff that we do is we allow you to write Elixir code and or laying in LFE or whatever where it runs on the beam and put it on some device that you can connect sensors to, or you can connect motors to, or you can produce sounds, talk, turn lights on, stuff like that, all these kinds of things. And you get access to the rest of the Elixir ecosystem. So you can connect these things to the internet, for example, and do other smart things.
You mentioned farming. Am I right that FarmBot uses nerves?
Yes, you're right. That's actually one of the unexpected use cases for nerves. It seems like a couple of farming places have taken to using nerves. So FarmBot's definitely an example. And if you go to their website, you can see their robot, which is, I think, Josh, you've talked about the FarmBot a little bit, but it's basically a CNC machine. That
I didn't know it used nerves. I didn't know it used Elixir at all when I was first interested in it. So I was really excited when I found that out.
Right. Yeah. Connor Rigby, he's on the Nerves core team. He works there. He's been a big fan of Elixir and nerves for, I think, a couple of years now. Right, Justin? He's been around for a while. Anyway, he contributes a lot to the project, but the bot has a lot of software. In fact, I think that his project probably is the largest open source nerves project out there at the moment.
Yeah, there's a lot of great examples that we pull from his repositories, and I know that it's used in a lot of discussions as far as examples on, or propositions, I should say, that come out on how we can better the experience and the tooling and stuff like that.
But we've had quite a few people interested in using nerves for farming related applications. A while ago, we had a couple places using nerves in devices that would automate irrigation of properties. There's a company called Bowery Farming in New York City that has these grows food in warehouses, and basically on each pallet that has not quite sure pallet's the right word, but they have a little planter area that's on these shelves, and each one is controlled by little hardware device that's running nerves and has a bunch of sensors to monitor the plants and take pictures of them to basically automate the growing process for these plants. So yeah, big surprise.
Yeah, I see in your examples also there's a beer bot. Now, this is interesting.
Yeah. So I think the best part is actually going to watch their YouTube videos to see it in action. But it's a little kiosk Nerves app. And I guess maybe little is the wrong word. But the whole idea is it does some facial recognition. There's to authenticate whether it can turn on a tap for you. And I think really to get the full experience, you have to go to the YouTube video or the links from the at the very consulting site that I posted. But it's kind of neat. It's actually quite neat.
Yeah, that was actually one of the examples about a situation where I would take I would try to be able to take what we build and then reiterate it and install it back into some home projects I have. And one of the home projects I was working on was a kegerator that would weigh the kegs and also control the temperature of the unit. And I'm like, oh, this is great. I love being able to roll the work on Nerves back into this and keep upgrading my system. And it's like, I really want to be able to find time to finish it. And then lo and behold, out comes a story about how somebody uses Nerves to build self-service beer kiosks.
That was awesome. That was a really neat story because we hadn't interacted with the group doing the development on this project. And then all of a sudden they just popped in our Slack channel and said, hey everyone, look at this thing that we did with Nerves. And we're like, whoa, this is actually quite well done and in use. It's just a really good surprise that day when it popped up.
Well, I think that's a testament to the documentation, right? That they didn't have to be talking to the creators, maintainers to just be able to use it, right?
Oh, yeah, sure. I'd like to think that we work hard in documentation, but at the same time, we always know that it's inadequate, that there are always pieces that we'd like to add. And there's some domain knowledge on building embedded systems that would be great to document more fully so that people moving into the Nerve space can get around some of these subtle problems, these little problems that you run into on embedded devices that you don't necessarily run into elsewhere. So it's really great when to see some people have success when you know that you still have so much more to do.
Well, I think...
Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
Sorry. Well, I think Nerves is a really exciting project. It's one that when I first started coming to the Elixir community and the ecosystem, it really grabbed my attention. I was like, wow, that is so cool that you can do this. And I think it makes a lot of sense, when you understand where Erlang came from, that it could be embedded and be long-running systems. And I think what you guys have done, it's correct me if I'm wrong, but if I understand it right, you can have a small Linux kernel that I can embed with the system. And so I really have a minimal size firmware, right? It can be quite small. What kind of sizes are you typically seeing?
Yeah, so that's the general idea. We're a system where you start small and you build on. And the nice advantage of that is that when you're working with Nerves, you can almost feel like you understand the system because it starts small. And I think we used to get down under 10 megabytes for these images that we'd install on Raspberry Pis. And you could go smaller. I think through the past couple of years, we've been playing around with what's the happy medium, right? When you start small, it's nice because you can look to see what's there, but it doesn't do anything. And we've ended up putting more and more stuff. I think the Raspberry Pi port certainly has been the recipient of most of the extra stuff so that people, when they want to get started, if they just want to use the camera, right?
Right.
Camera's a particularly fun item to start out with and play around with. So we add the camera software in there so that you don't have to customize the Nerves port to use that.
And so from the development portion of things too, I mean, to speak to that, the size that we're talking about, that we're producing, and the customization of this, Nerves sort of creates an experience that, as Frank so perfectly mentioned, it's your bridge from Elixir to the physical world. Such a great way to state it. I mean, to craft that bridge, essentially, you start with your application source code that you would write normally like an Elixir application. But then you need to marry that together with something that it can bring up on an embedded Linux device. So you need the Linux kernel. And so as part of the Nerves tooling and systems, you can produce, in the end, kind of like a unikernel experience in a way. Like it'll package together your application and like Linux kernel and anything else that you want to decorate the Linux system with. And as Frank was saying, like with the expansion of our Raspberry Pi systems getting a little bit bigger and being a little bit more batteries included, we might turn on like support for some additional Wi-Fi drivers so that people on Raspberry Pi 2, for example, can still plug in like a common USB Wi-Fi adapter and get Wi-Fi. But that's where the little bits of stuff in our systems add up. But there's nothing to stop people to go more advanced. I mean, once you start to hone in on exactly what you need for that target system, you can basically take the original recipes and you can trim them down even further to have only the things that you need for your application to run and package that up. You don't have to include things from upstream, like from our supported ports, like the Raspberry Pi ports that we put out. You can easily fork those and then modify them to be able to add or remove anything else that you might need.
Yeah, I just might add just one part. When you work with Nerves, there are kind of two worlds that you work in. There's the Elixir focused world, and then there's the low level, Linux kernel device drivers world. And one of the goals with Nerves is to try to keep you in that Elixir world. That's a world where a lot of us are very comfortable in. The build cycles are very quick. You can try out code, update it. You have access to a lot of libraries. The Elixir ecosystem is particularly rich. So the goal for all of us on the NerdScore team is how do we push more people to stay in that Elixir-centric world? But the reality is that you have a new board that you want to port Nerves to for some project for work or some hobby project. You're going to have to get to the low-level details, and that's why we use the Linux kernel. Linux kernel is by far the easiest way to get odd device drivers working for a piece of hardware, because someone usually will have ported it for you. And but you want to spend a little time in that world, the Linux kernel world, and what we group together as the Nerve system world to get the board support part of your project set up. But once you get that set up, then you can get in the general Elixir lifecycle of coding, of editing, compiling, then trying it out, and even doing some more fancy things to make your debugging loop a little bit tighter. And that's where we want people to stay.
So in the world of device programming, where does Elixir fit in the overall picture? Because when we started this conversation thinking about Nerves, I'd never heard of Nerves before, but I've never actually heard of people doing a lot of programming of devices and programming of chips and this stuff through Elixir. So how new is it? Are people starting to be drawn to it? And what benefits does Elixir provide over other solutions that might be out there?
I can answer some of this, and Justin, I know, will chime in. The embedded world is very broad. That's one thing to keep in mind. Going from things that are simpler than the old style handheld watch, not a smartwatch, but very simple devices, up to I've even worked on some stuff that had GPUs in it that's technically embedded. As for where Nerves fits in for network devices. I mean, it's a typical Elixir thing. So embedded now with IoT, and there are a lot of forces that are pushing devices to be networked. It's nice to be able to code in a higher level language. So that's pushing some of this. I mean, you can do all this stuff in C and C++ and many other languages, but I think that many of us have used Elixir can say that some of the network programming is a little bit easier for many things. The other place where Nerves fits is in the devices that need to be a little bit smarter. So there's a set of embedded devices that are just sensors, and they just send data up. And that's not a Nerves target. There's a lot of other stuff just to send data up. But if your device has to have a lot of business logic to work offline, or if it starts doing needs to do a lot of local processing, you'll see in some of the devices that we show off or that have made it to production that they're general smarts that they need to have locally. Or the area that we want to fit in is for those people who are used to programming in these higher level language, coming from Elixir, Ruby, a higher level language, to give them to empower them to actually work on these embedded devices too in a language that's familiar. and productive for them.
So what you're saying is eventually when we're taken over by robots, they're probably going to be Elixir-based nerve robots, right? Which is probably where the name nerve came from, right? They're full of nerves, man.
All right, why don't we just go with that? Yeah.
The hard part there is they'll be fault tolerant, so that'll be dangerous. But speaking of which, that's one of the big example points. I mean, the fault tolerance in Elixir and Erlang, that you get the resilience with it. It's another key benefit to working in this space. But as Frank was putting it too, I mean, so we're targeting this like embedded Linux space, which has soft real time guarantees on the processing. All right, so you're not going to necessarily use nerves to be communicating with any sort of like other external devices or sensors that have like timing constraints. Those things would be better for like the microcontroller levels where they're going to be hard real time devices. So, but you can use nerves to sort of be a layer on top of them. Like you can supervise their activities or act as a communication bus in that case and an uplink to the network. And that's sort of the key area where it starts to fit in then.
Any negatives to it? Any reason not to use nerves over other options?
I mean, some of this comes down to what developers are.
Right, but aside from code preference.
Right.
Code preference. I'm just trying to see, like, you guys paint a wonderful picture. It makes me think that everybody should jump on board. But I just want to know, like, what's the catch, right?
Oh, well, I mean, sure. There are a lot of types of devices that people might want to build. And on some of these devices, some of the features that they have, the tools might be better built out for them in other languages. If you're doing a lot of computer vision work, that's not a domain that you're like, oh, got to use Erlang to use computer vision, right? That's not the first thing you think of. There are solutions for computer vision based projects that are closer to ready to go than with nerves. One thing that you can do with nerves is pull in some of those projects. We have people who pull in Python and larger projects that are built in other languages. I wouldn't say that that's where we focus. When you're starting a project, you have to weigh those pros and cons. If you're going to pull in a massive Python framework to do computer vision, then maybe a couple other ways of approaching that project would be easier than using nerves.
So you could, as I understand it, it would be appropriate to say, if I want my small IoT device to be like a headless little thing, but it could have a web interface, right? So I could connect to it over my network and interact with it through like a web page that it could be hosting and serving, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, people marry Phoenix with nerves. That's a common thing because Phoenix is for many people who come to the nerves community, they know Phoenix pretty well. And so it's very natural for them to make a project that has Phoenix, write some web control, write up some logic to expose a web UI to getting information about their sensors, turning things on and off, displaying video, having a camera that can remotely stream video back to you over that UI. So it's actually great.
You can stand up a Phoenix web server, and as you were saying, Mark, you can connect to it just over your local network. Or as Frank was saying, you can connect a display to it and actually render the browser, like a headless sort of Chromeless browser, directly on the actual user interface. That was another example piece, something that I felt like I wanted to do as a project to be able to use nerves for. And you ask about, its other benefits. And another one I think of here is like, well, I started getting into like, we talk about farming and we spend a lot of time seeing people come through and ask questions about using nerves. And we say how it's nice and surprising that there's a lot of people that are using it for doing farming projects in production, like FarmBot, Bowery, and there's plenty of others, I'm sure. But it kind of got me curious. So I built my own. I was like, all right, let me try this out. I actually got some stuff from like the local hardware stores and put together my own sort of deep water culture farming system. I realized that what I needed to be able to like control the lights. And I have a lot of parts that sort of just sit around waiting for projects to get built. I happen to have enough on hand, and within 2 hours, I was able to, from start to finish, build 7-inch touchscreen device that rendered Phoenix web interfaces that I could draw and paint whatever I wanted onto for the controls for the lighting. and then upload code that would like actually schedule the on-off timers for the 2 different lights that I have. And it was like 2 hours that I did it. I was just so happy and impressed by the speed, like how productive. I mean, we all know and hear the marketing for Elixir, just how productive it's supposed to make you. But being able to apply it in that case of, within 2 hours being able to upload this and get it running. And by the way, that was like a month ago, and it's been running ever since, me having to touch it. Makes me think of one of my favorite quotes from earlier on when I was starting to work with Frank a lot more. We had Wendy Smoke who came through, and she built a cat feeder for one of her like pet projects, and she has a whole blog about it. It's really neat. And so she came through and she built it, and then she said to us once at a conference, she goes, Nerves is great. I put this up and I built it, but the problem is it just sits there and works, and I don't get the joy of continually tinkering with it. So it's really nice, productive, and it just keeps working.
Well, that is cool. I love the idea of the lights. And for those of you who can't see the video, he kind of tilted the camera down. We can see these little canisters in the background working with these pretty lights on them. It's like, wow, that's awesome. So I know one of the other reasons we wanted to have you on is because you guys had a recent big announcement with the release. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, Nerves 1.0. It's finally here. It was the first commit was was it about a decade ago or more? No.
The first commit was about 5 years ago, I think.
Oh, right. Yes.
Not that old.
That rounds up to a decade, though.
Yeah, that wraps up. It was October 29th, 2013, the first commit there. Yeah, it's been a lot in the making. Frank back then started things out, and I know Frank had some early interests, and then I joined on a little bit later to help push things forward with the Elixir tooling and everything. But it's really it's been a lot of fun, and it's finally together. And it I gotta say, it's oftentimes I find myself spending so much time working on Nerves that I don't get a lot of that I didn't ever get a lot of time to like use Nerves. And the closer and closer we got to the release date for 1.0, the more chances I had to be able to get back and try to implement it. And finally, by the end, it was just such a joy that I felt like things they just worked, and it was comfortable that it I felt like it was time. I mean, Frank, I don't want to speak for you on that one, but
it's been a long time coming. There's a lot of work to get some of the APIs and some of the base infrastructure to a place where you feel comfortable putting some stakes in the ground and saying you're not going to change this area of it. And it's quite a big area for us. I think there are 13 projects or something that we published that day for 1.0 day. So, but it needed to be done. People are starting to use us in production, and it certainly makes people feel more comfortable with the project when they know that you're not going to change some APIs out from underneath them. And we really want to provide that commitment. So that's the 1.0.
Are there any recent features that you've added that you're like most excited about, or anything that you'd like to share with people?
Well, there are things that I'm excited about. I'm very excited about serial numbers. I will have to write that up. This is a provisioning thing. It's one of those details that you get when you start making a lot of devices and start producing them. A lot of details in production. So I'm not quite sure that's the most exciting topic, but it's one I'm personally excited about. The other one I'm super excited about, which isn't that we're currently working on right now, is something called Nerves Hub. And the problem that we have is we want to be able to send firmware updates to devices, right? It's inevitable. Devices need to have new software. So we need to have a system for updating them. Our only open source method of updating devices prior to Nerves Hub was this something called Nerves Firmware SSH, which lets us effectively SSH to a device and push new software over to it. And it works pretty well until you have devices and fields behind firewalls. So long as you can push devices, which push code to devices, you're good with it. What we want to do with Nerves Hub is get an open source version of a firmware update server that people could install a little piece of client code on their devices. It would call home to what we're calling the Nerves Hub, and will decide whether to send new software down to the devices. That is currently in progress. We have a bunch of companies working on this right now. Smartrent's working on it, Tote's working on it, Consulting's working on it. We have a couple hobbyists even contributing to it. And this has just been a lot of fun for me to finally see this come to fruition, because we had been watching other companies build their own update servers and not being able to open source them. So it's like every time we go through this process where a new company uses Nerves, and then they have their own way of updating devices, and we can't leverage that to any new devices because it's tied in with their product. So this is coming. We're in the midst of it.
It's super exciting to be able to see just the technology that goes together to do it. I mean, it's its own example of how to leverage the whole ecosystem of Elixir to build some cool services. I mean, like Nerves Hub is going to be built using Phoenix, also uses Phoenix channels to be able to connect and stream and hold connections to the devices in the field, and for its messaging protocols. And then we're able to do full firmware updates and remote management at that point, or the remote firmware management at that point with these devices in the field. So seeing all the technology come together, I mean, Ecto and Phoenix and like all of this stuff just work with Nerves together like in harmony is like quite a testament to how productive the whole stack can be.
Yep. This is, I imagine some people listening to this are be like, oh, wow, firmware updates or software updates. It's super exciting. Well, I guess when you start getting involved with this stuff, it does become this is one of those pieces of the puzzle to deploying lots of devices, or even just a couple devices, and being able to manage them. And it comes in very handy when you have it, and when you don't have it, you notice it and you start looking around for solutions. And there certainly are plenty of other solutions, but that come close, but just not quite. And this one's starting to feel pretty good. And it's also been a pleasure working with a lot of people in the community who've stepped up to contribute some time to this project.
Speaking of community, are there places to go for people who are interested in getting involved in this, not just to help on the coding side, but also people who have never really got into embedded development before and want to get in and want to try it out using Nerves? Where would you send them?
Well, we have two main places. One's the Elixir forum. So there's actually a Nerves section to it that many of us on the Nerves core team, we monitor that very regularly. Then for the if you want to talk to people in more real time, we're also on the Elixir Lang Slack, and we have several people on the Elixir Lang Slack that really enjoy helping people get into working with electronics, and we'll answer pretty much just about any question to get you over some of the hurdles, including where to go for picking out the friendly hardware, right? Some hardware is a little bit friendlier than others. If you have a problem with something with a bus, like an I2C bus, what happens when I don't get anything back? They'll help. They're really great.
So do you get super excited when you see like an old original Nintendo controller that's like ripped halfway down the cord? Is that something you could turn around and use?
Okay, so we have one member of our community who likes everything Nintendo, and when he hears this, his ears are going to certainly perk up. So I would just put out, if anyone mentions anything Nintendo related, they will get some very good support on our Elixir Lang Slack.
Cool. Oh, that's funny.
So, I was just going to say, I'm interested in distribution in Nerves. Like, are there solid examples around using Elixir's distribution with Nerves? Obviously, I expect it to work just kind of like it would, since you have networking. But what's the coolest thing someone's done with distributed Nerves?
There was a post a while back about how somebody took the Nerves system for Lego EV3. It's the Mindstorms brick. Like Lego has a whole robotics system. Yeah. They took like, I think it was like 4 bricks or something, and they were all independently running the quote same version of the firmware. What they ended up doing was it would work together over distribution to first off determine, it was a color sorting machine. So it would sort these balls coming down this little assembly line.
I saw that.
Yeah, and so like that I would say is the one that I saw that was most striking of a public use of Nerves doing distributed Erlang to be able to work together in that case. Yeah. There was another example that Timo put together, and I believe he may have talked about it at one of the previous Elixir comps in Europe. He used Nerves to be able to, in conjunction with building this a replacement for EPMD that did service discovery built in. And I think that he, in his example, just used it to do like a distributed Blinky, as it was called. So one of the Hello World project that you do in Nerves is what we call Blinky. It's like blinking a light, right? That's like the equivalent to doing like Hello World and like your programming courses, getting ready with a language. And so he did one where you would use service discovery for finding on the same network additional nodes that were connected running the same firmware that offered the same service of this blinking light. And they would automatically connect together with distributed Erlang and then blink like in harmony. Like they would blink in unison. So that was another one. I mean, blinking lights, like how cool is that, right?
Awesome.
It's alive. Yeah, I actually just walked over to my bookshelf here and pulled out this old electronics kit, which I don't even know what's in it, but I'm wondering if I can get something like that rolling. That would be pretty neat.
Yeah.
The easiest way to get started really is with the Raspberry Pi Zero W. It's like in the US, it's like a $10 board, right? And it's such a great thing to have on hand when just doing like some Nerves. If you just want to tinker and play with it and poke at Nerves and see what it's like running,
Right.
It's just a great experience because it's got this USB port on it that you can plug into. That's the gadget port, and we configure it out of the box with our systems. You plug the board into your computer using a USB cable from that port, and you get power. It powers the board. You get a virtual serial port that gives you a connection to see like the IEX shell and what's going on the running target, and it also supplies network as well. So it's like one-stop shop, real easy to be able to get up and running and fiddling with.
So tell me this also. I know you talked about having a Phoenix running on this. Is it possible to take one of these and create a standalone device that will access the internet and load a browser and refresh it every 5 seconds or something like that? Is that possible using your stuff?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you can do it with a headless instance, or you can have a screen on it. One example point of this would be used in like digital signage. Like if you wanted to just, like for example, have like you have a conference room at your office maybe that you want to be able to display like a sign on the outside door that you can render like the upcoming events in it. If you can program the web page for it and have it reach the back web page, you can just have the front end interface connected to it and receiving updates. I mean, you can even connect to a Phoenix server upstream if you wanted and use channels to push new data down. And speaking of which too, it's in the fall of this year, 2018, we're going to have at ElixirConf, one of our training courses that Frank and I are offering is we're going to be building these kinds of devices. Actually, it's going to be a project building a 7-inch Raspberry Pi display with a Pi 3 on the back. And we're essentially going to build a Nerves device that you can render web content to the display. I think the second day is sold out, but the first day is still available. Yeah.
There you go. Very cool. Where do they go to get that?
You can register for that course on the ElixirConf page.
Perfect. elixirconf.com.
Yep.
Awesome.
And we should also mention that there's another Nerves training run by a couple other members of the Nerves core team there. And they'll be doing more camera stuff, Raspberry Pi Zero and camera stuff. So that one's a good one too. Would you mind giving a shout out to all of the other core members of the team? Absolutely. So the rest of the core teams, Greg Meffert is on it, Tim Mecklin, and we also have Connor Rigby. So he's the farm guy. And then it's Justin and me. Justin. Awesome. Haven't forgotten someone, right?
I don't think so. Yeah. They're also, it's on the GitHub page too. Yeah.
So is there anything else that we haven't talked about yet that you guys would like to discuss that maybe we missed?
Yeah, so this is Elixir native UI. This is something that I get super excited about. It's not.
I'm gonna stop you there. You seem to get excited a lot.
Well, you're picking my favorite topics today.
For those who aren't watching, I don't think I've seen anything but a beaming smile from Frank. So, yeah.
Well, you have chosen the best topics today. So, and this is one last one. I just want to mention a little bit about the Elixir native UI. So, Elixir native UI is referring to the capability to draw user interfaces directly in Elixir. And the two Elixir native UI projects that I know about right now, both are backed by OpenGL. So if we go back to what we're currently doing when we want to have a user interface on a Nerves device, we on the Nerves device, we have a Chromium web browser that comes up and renders web pages. And this is super useful. A lot of people are familiar with writing HTML and JavaScript, and you can render stuff. The downside to running a Chromium browser on your Nerves device is that it's a little slow. A lot of the devices that run Nerves are not nearly as powerful as your laptop or desktop. So it's kind of, if you're not careful, your UI will be a little sluggish. It's also just a lot of code to get working. And when you start doing a lot of development with this, you kind of get frustrated by the amount of code moving around. The Elixir native UIs is another option. And these things both, you write your UI just in plain Elixir, call into them, and it renders OpenGL. You can do 3D effects. The demos for the two libraries that I posted in the notes, the Uderzo, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, and then Boyd Malter's Scenic. Yeah, things are going 60 frames a second on some low-end platforms because they're taking advantage of the OpenGL support. And I think that both of those will open up some nice UI options for lower end Nerves devices that can't have the web browser, and also just be a crazy amount of fun to play around with. Justin, do you share my excitement on these?
I definitely do. The one thing that I'm not a big fan of is, I'll be very specific, CSS. I'm just not good at it. And so if I want something simple that I just need a few buttons, I want to be able to just render up some little widgets that I can control and like take some feedback, and putting up an entire web browser to do so sometimes feels bulky. So it's like, it is very exciting to be able to see these toolkits come out that can let you leverage the power that you're sort of spinning out on the web frameworks. You're going to lose a little bit of that horsepower on the web frameworks, and you'll gain it back if you just need some simplicity, maybe on the render directly portions of things. I mean, there's a time and a place for both. If you have a project that you have a whole bunch of web developers on hand that you need some user interfaces done for, and you can have and you have enough horsepower to be able to drive like the web front end for that, then yeah, you basically have a whole big handful of free embedded UI developers that they didn't know it. Yeah, so you can choose either, and there's no real right answer to which one's better. But ultimately, it's really nice and exciting to see that there's people out there that are looking to be able to solve this problem. Like, I don't know how familiar you guys are with Wix widgets. Like that was like the Erlang thing that they shipped with, right? I think that's like what Observer runs using. WX.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's not really sustainable for embedded stuff. So like what's included, like you can't really use that. It's not going to work. I know Frank knows more about that.
Well,
it's not a great experience anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's pretty easy for us because WX has a note saying you can't cross compile it, and everything in Nerves has to be cross compilable. I bet we probably could figure out some way, but I think what's really interesting about these Elixir native UIs is that they're taking a more functional approach to designing the UI framework, which I think will be very interesting and is probably worth its own discussion. Whereas a lot of the existing frameworks, in WX included, you see a lot of OO in them just by their where they came from.
World wants to get a hold of you, other than Googling you, which you both come up pretty readily, especially in all of the conference talks that you've spoken with. What's the best way to find you?
Well, we hang out at the Elixir forum and on the Elixir Slack. Certainly not opposed to anyone contacting me on GitHub or via my email. It's actually posted if you Google around enough. But the best places would be the Elixir Lang Slacker forum.
Perfect. And can we follow you guys on Twitter?
Absolutely. Yeah. Both of us are on Twitter. So I'm at Hunleth.
And at Mobile Overlord.
That doesn't play in well to what we're talking about here.
What was the first one? Frank, what was yours again?
Oh, mine's at F Hunleth. Here,
Yeah,
Hunleth. Yeah.
I thought you said Butler.
Oh, no, most people, when they call it Hunleth. Yeah.
Okay, I'm with you now. Okay, perfect. All right. Probably shouldn't follow Buttlift.
No, that would be better.
Absolutely. Okay, let's get the pick.
So I have just one, and it is an Elixir forum thread. Should we adopt Dave's way of building applications as a series of components? It's from Dave Thomas's talk about the way he wants to and is starting to build Elixir applications. And I linked to a reply from Joe Armstrong, which is nice. But the whole thread has lots of really good conversation from really smart people. And if nothing else, it's a really good read that'll make you think a bit. And that's it.
Great. Mark, how about you?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, if anyone has worked with me before, they know that Linux is my preferred OS. And so I got a new work computer, and it is a Dell XPS 13, the new edition with the developer edition. So it comes with Linux preloaded. And I love it. And it's high DPI and everything. And so I just want to give a shout out to that hardware. It's nice. It looks very fancy, very sleek. So that's my pick.
Is it the tablet one when it flips backwards?
No, it's not a convertible. It's just kind of like a normal little laptop, but
Gotcha.
It's small, but has a lot of power too.
The number one rated developer laptop that's not Mac is that one right there. Very cool. I've got one.
I would have to say I have that exact machine, and I absolutely love it because it's the first, quote, Ultrabook style size and power performance, because I guess power performance for the Ultrabook series, you need to be with under 15 watts of like peak power at some performance ratings. It's the first time that they put a quad core under that power limit. So like the MacBook Pros that had the quad core processors that would use like 85 watts of power or so, this thing would run circles around it I mean, we talk about building nerve stuff and build root builds. They take a very long time, and on my Mac, I could probably squeeze out like maybe 2 builds on a battery, and on that Dell, I can squeeze out like 4, almost 5 sometimes. So it's a really great machine.
That's cool. I actually recently bought my Mac fried out, and I recently bought a Surface Book 2, thinking that'll work for me. And I didn't use Linux. I used Windows with the Ubuntu subsystem, and it didn't work at all. Not nearly what I needed it. So I went back and latched myself to the Mac teat once again. And here we are. Okay, so my picks started from a challenge from a buddy. He said, "Hey, if I go walking in the morning, you go walk in the morning. Let's just keep each other honest." And I thought, okay, I'll give it a shot. I can do this. I'm just so you know, I weigh 300 pounds roughly. And I could use the walk. so I go out the first day and I walk 2.5 miles, and I got back and I was beat and sweaty and nasty. And I thought, I could do that again because of my second pick. So my first pick is walking. I've been doing that every day for a week now, averaging about 4 miles a day. And it's getting easier. I had to go buy better shoes, but it's getting a lot easier. And also I'm listening to an audiobook on an app called Overdrive. Overdrive is it's really only for the United States, but it allows you to go to your local library. They'll give you your library card, and then you can use that card ID to be able to listen to and check out audiobooks, regular books on this app. So I'm listening to The Guilty by David Baldacci, and I get excited every morning when I wake up because I get to continue to find out like who killed the guy. So yeah, those are my picks. Frank, how about you?
I would like to take a look at some of the Elixir native UI stuff. And so Josh Adams, he posted that should we adopt Dave's way of building applications. So if you take a look at that thread, the author of one of those Elixir native UI frameworks is actually, I think he started that link. So Cease to Groot, I believe I hope that's how you pronounce his name. But I think it's a very interesting topic. I think that thinking about how to design a UI framework in a functional way is an interesting thing to work out in your mind. So I highly encourage taking a look at Uderzo. And also when ElixirConf comes around, Boyd Moulter, he's done a lot of thinking. So if you look at last year's talk from him, he has some information about the Elixir native UI in that. So that'd be my pick.
Great. Justin, why don't you finish this off?
Oh, man. Well, let's see. My picks lately, one thing I've been getting into this year is gardening. Let's see. So there's been a lot of just general chaos building over We talked about tons of repositories that we manage with Nerves, and then the work that's been exploding in growth on Nerves Hub, and just trying to be able to keep up with everything. I've been trying to find some ways of relaxation.
So you go watch the robot do your gardening. I get it.
Yeah. It's so peaceful to just watch robots garden for you. Actually, I so very much want a farm bot. But so I have the same theory towards like why would I buy a product when I can just build it, but not towards FarmBot. FarmBot's like the exception, but it's like, why would I buy something that can farm for me if I don't understand farming to begin with? And so I'm using my gateway, my entryway into FarmBot, which is that I need to be able to I need to understand it first before I can load it enough that I want my robot to do it for me. And then gardening, it's been really peaceful. And then my other pick I would say would be I've been reading the meditation book Wherever You Go, There You Are. It's a popular classic, sort of going hand in hand, trying to be able to just internalize things a little bit more and understand everything.
Love it. Wherever you go, there you are. Those are wise words to end on this podcast. So we want to thank our sponsors for sponsoring this podcast. We want to thank our guests for coming on, and we look forward to our podcast next week. And we will see you next week. Bye.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.